What's going on, guys? Jason Frausto for TennisUnleashed.net. Today I'm doing a complete forehand technique breakdown on Joao Fonseca. The 18-year-old from Brazil is up to a career high of 113 in the world, hitting some absolutely missile forehands. If you want to find out what the keys to his forehand are, stay tuned. It's coming up next. All right, so before I jump into this breakdown of Fonseca's forehand, make sure you check us out on both TikTok and Instagram. I'm creating content there. It's a little bit different than the stuff you see here. It's still instructional, but different formats, shorter formats. So check us out, Tennis Unleashed on Instagram and TikTok. Now, I'm going to let Fonseca's forehand play once in real time before we break this down, guys. So let's check this thing out here quick. And that looks technically sound. Let's look at it again one more time, real speed. And the reason that we have to slow things down like this is because we know the human eye can be deceiving. You cannot clearly see things with the naked eye. That's the purpose of doing high-speed video analysis, whether it's technique or it's match play. It's to see the things that the human eye cannot see on its own. So it's a little assistance, right? So let's just go back for a second. We'll break this thing down now. We've got the next gen finals right here. And then on the right side, a match from last year on clay. So let's look at this thing. First things first. We see a nice split step from Fonseca, right? So it goes from here, he splits on the left side of the screen and then splits just a hair later on the right side of the screen. Some keys with the split, and I talk about this stuff all the time, but it's key to learn these things to have a really good athletic base. But we want to see the feet past shoulder width apart when you make your split step. So shoulders are here and here, feet past shoulder width apart, because you need to be exploding out of your split step when you go to the ball to hit the ball. And having wide feet allows your hips and your knees to really spring and explode to the ball. On the left side of the screen in this position here, the split step position, we notice some really good angles from the head to the hips to the knees to the feet. We see some good angles. That's how we know he's wide and he's not just standing straight up and down. That's really, really important stuff. In his ready position, something really interesting. A lot of players in the ready position, a lot of male players will hold two hands, right, on the handle, but they'll have the left hand here, the top hand, actually up on the throat of the racket, whether that's the bottom, the middle, or the high part of it. And Fonseca actually is holding the grip here. Now, what I've noticed with him watching a lot of his match play in the last couple months is his left hand will be, sometimes on the handle, and sometimes he'll hold it on the throat of the racket, depending, I think, on what he thinks he's going to get on the next shot. So he's anticipating a little bit. Again, a lot of guys are up here, but he holds either here or here, it seems, based on what he feels is going to happen for the next shot. Another thing we see in the ready position, he has a nice gap here between his elbow and his hip. About 1 to 2 tennis balls of space is what I recommend for most people in the ready position, a gap between the elbow and the body. So with most students, I train them to have a little bit of a gap there. And the reason is because it's easier to set up that ATP forehand style technique with a little baby gap at the beginning instead of having your elbow kind of glued right to your hips. You can see it makes almost the shape here of a little triangle, right? Just between the body there and the elbow. So from that position, we can see he's set up really well. Let's move forward now, has the split. And you can see on the left side of the screen, it's really interesting how quick he has the two hands on the handle here and goes into, right, because he's hitting a forehand, this high left hand on the high part of the throat position. So he gets into that position really quick. We notice the gap between his elbow and his hips has actually increased a little bit here. So he's pushed his elbow back a little bit and increased the size of the gap between the elbow and the body a little bit. So that triangle has become a little bit bigger, right? And then again, dominating left hand on the throat of the racket right here, controlling it. From here, guys, we're going to the next thing. He makes a really good unit turn of his body. And a unit turn at this point is a very standard term for technique on the forehand side, but it just basically means he keeps his left hand here on the throat of the racket, right? That part of the racket, until he gets his belly button and his shoulders pointed to the right, which we can clearly see on both sides of the screen here. So he leaves the left hand on the body, right? And coils his upper body, because when we're hitting a forehand, we're not just using our arm. A lot of people go out, recreational players, start slapping forehands around with just their arm. You want to use your body to hit the shot, and that's what Fonseca is doing, is using the body by getting this nice coil here and keeping his left hand on, right? So again, from here, keeping it on until he finishes that big turn and that unit turn of his body. And then as we go through the unit turn, right, and we start to go into this position here, we can see he lets go of the throw to the racket with his left hand around the time, roughly, that it reaches his back shoulder, right? Because that ensures, if you do that, that you have a really good coil of your upper body, and that's what you want. You want to have this really strong coil position. Again, we're not just using our arm to hit the ball, we're using our body. We're delivering a haymaker when we have time to hit forehands, big knockout punches. So from here, we can see a couple other things. Forehand on the right side of the screen is a little bit higher ball that he's going to be hitting. So his right hand here, he brings it up a little bit above his shoulder in his loop on his forehand. So he brings that up a little bit more. On the left, the ball is a little bit lower ball. So we can see his hand is not above the shoulder like it is on the screen, on the right side of the screen over here. So he's adjusted the height of his takeback based on the ball he's getting and how much time he has to hit it. He's done that naturally, okay? From this position right here, the next really important thing that we see is we can see the strings of the racket just kind of naturally with his grip position are pointed off to the right. You can see that here, angled a little bit there, but pointed off to the right, closed. And then from that position, as we go forward, he gets into what we call a loaded position. And all that means is you're taking your outside foot, usually your right foot, your right leg, and you're bending it and pushing your weight into the ground, right? And you're going to bend and get into this loaded position before you swing your racket forward towards the ball. So you can see the racket still kind of in this up position while he's in this loaded position. And when you're in this loaded position, it's really easy to get power, right? You're pushing off the ground. You're initiating your swing with your legs. And again, not just using your arm. That's the key here. So from this loaded position, we see a few things. Fonseca, racket strings kind of pointed a little bit back and towards the ground. You can see the racket strings there. A lot of that has to do with grip, but there are players that don't achieve this position. Go back to the past, a guy like Del Potro was somebody that didn't really get into this angled position on his forehand, a little bit more mild grip as well. And then from here, guys, we can see really belly button, again, off to the side, chest off to the side, front shoulder, the left shoulder, turned a little bit more than the back shoulder. So again, really good coil. So turning the front shoulder more than the back shoulder. As soon as the left arm lets go of the throw to the racket, you can see his arm, the left arm, is going to perform a sweeping motion, and it's going to clear out of the way so that he can rotate into the hit. And we're just kind of skipping a little bit ahead here, but watch that left arm sweep and then tuck into the body. That helps acceleration and braking. And then from here as well, you can see it goes into the loaded position, right? We talked about that. Keys in the loaded position, racket head off to the right of his hitting hand. That's going to help set up that ATP desired forehand that everybody in the world wants these days, right? So that's off to the right of the hitting hand. And then from that position, his hitting arm needs to be relaxed. Fonseca, unlike a lot of players these days, doesn't straighten out his hitting arm. It doesn't get completely straight like you see with somebody like a Carlos Alcaraz, Roger Federer, that type of thing. He actually maintains this bent position, a little more Stan Wawrinka style, with the hitting arm, maintains that bend throughout the swing. So even here, as his racket starts to drop, you can see his arm in both videos never gets straight. Okay, keeps it in that bent position. And again, a lot of people, I got to hit a straight arm forehand because you get more leverage and get more power and spin. Technically, yeah, it's a longer lever, that's true. But Fonseca is absolutely hitting missile forehands while keeping this bent arm position, just like Wawrinka, proving that you don't absolutely have to have a straight arm forehand. It's not needed to get to the top of the game, right, or get to a super high level. And again, he's hitting titanic forehands. A couple other keys in this position, you guys. Racket off to the right, just like this. Besides that, we're looking for a relaxed arm, right? You can see his wrist and arm are relaxed here. And then from this position, I'm also looking for the tip of his racket right here to flip from this position to behind his hitting elbow. So that's one of the keys. If the arm is relaxed, this is one of the key checkpoints that you want to hit on your forehand is, does the tip of your racket get behind your hitting elbow before you accelerate forward to the ball? And we can clearly see with Fonseca, right? He achieves that position really easily here. Tip of the racket well behind the hitting elbow. And the reason that you want that position, right, is because that means the swing to the ball is a longer path, and that's going to make it easier to get more power on the ball. If your tip of your racket doesn't get to a position that's at least close to your elbow, a lot of people, they only get it to about here. That means the swing forward to the ball is shorter, which means your racket's moving slower, which means it has less spin and less speed. And again, Best players in the world, they achieve this position consistently. It's not Fonseca only. It's people like Sinner, Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, all hit this position, right? So tip of the racket behind the elbow is key. Keep your arm relaxed. How do you achieve this position here? What I tell most people is this: take your right shoulder, your hitting shoulder, and pull a little bit with your right shoulder towards, forward with the racket. Pull on it a little bit, or take your hips and really rotate those into the ball for contact. That's the easiest way with a relaxed arm to get your racket to flip from here to here. People that don't get into that position, the tip flip I call it, they don't achieve this. They tend to just pull with the lower part of their arm. And when you pull with the lower part of your arm, you tend not to achieve that key position. So from here, guys, what we notice from this loaded position again, we want to really get a nice bend on the outside leg, or if we're stepping into the ball, hitting with a neutral stance, still really bend your knees and use your legs. From this position, right, we're going to come from here. You can really see on the right side of the screen. It's not just because it's a high ball. It's because he's really loading on the forehand, but his right leg is going to go from this bent position, and it's really going to extend, right? And it's really going to straighten up before he gets to the contact point there. So for big power, we have to really use the ground before we swing at the ball. Your racket really shouldn't be moving forward much of it at all until your legs push off the ground and start the forward swing. And we see that in both videos. Even the video on the left here, where it's a lower ball and he's going to stay down more on the shot, he pushes from the ground a little bit, right? And then that helps initiate that forward swing. And then the next big things that we notice with Fonseca's forehand, right? We can see from here, guys, pushing from the ground, tip flip, gets that tip behind the elbow for a long swing into the impact. And then from here, watch the hips and shoulders really rotate into contact. So at contact with the ball, what we're looking for, right, is his belly button pointed forward? Is his chest pointed forward, right? Those are big keys. Usually the hitting shoulder, the right shoulder, will be lower than the left shoulder. That's typical as well, especially when we're trying to put spin on the ball. And then the tip of the racket here will be below and angled down from the hitting hand like that, because we're trying to apply spin when we drive the ball. Yes, you can hit the ball flatter, but when you're hitting flatter, the line from your hand to your tip of your racket will be more straight across than it is with Fonseca, where it's more dipped down with the tip and angled down. That ensures good spin on the ball. At contact as well, we want to look at the gap between the body, right, the elbow, and the side and the hip. It should make a triangle just like this. We should have that space between our body at contact. For most players, that means we're getting a little further out, a little longer lever, usually equals more power. So we're getting proper space here. On this side, what we're looking for from contact, besides this space here, is we're looking to see is his hitting elbow in front of his body and his hips at contact, and it is in front at contact right here. And then just from that position, I'm looking for the racket to basically make a rainbow or windshield wiper type motion from right to left as he follows through, and he makes that right there. A lot of people have questions about, follow through. And what I'll tell you on follow through is this: he has a higher follow through on this one, right? And also a little bit lower, I guess, one on the left. It depends what you're trying to do with the ball. If you're trying to drive the ball and you're deeper in the court, usually your follow throughs are going to be higher. If you are closer inside the court, service line, things like that, trying to hit angles, your follow-throughs are going to be lower and closer to your hip or your midsection when you follow through. So your follow-through is just based on what you're trying to do with the ball. And with Fonseca on these shots, right on the right and left here, we've got one higher follow-through because he's deeper in the court trying to drive the ball deep. And then the one on the left here, it's a little bit lower than the one on the right. And then just the last few things I want to point out, guys, that loaded position here for the right foot, you transfer your weight from your right foot to, right, the left foot. And you really turn on this one right here. But again, watch, right foot here, transfer to left foot. So we're really trying to focus on that, right? Transferring our weight the best that we can. And then if we follow through really well and really turn on the ball, look at his back. You can see his back pointed off to the right and his back pointed to the right on this forehand as well. So he's really rotated on these well and used his body to hit the shots. A lot of people will follow through and their follow through of their body stops with their body pointing straight at the net, and then they're just done. You have to keep rotating and shifting your weight from right to left, and then you'll get that big turn on the shot. If you haven't already, make sure you follow us on both Instagram and TikTok. We have different types of content going up on both of those platforms that's not going up on YouTube that I think you'll find helpful. I'm Jason Frausto for tennisunleashed.net. I'll see you next time.